Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. A little while ago, we looked at the first meetup of Lara Croft, adventuring archaeologist, and Sarah Pizzini, New York detective, with a cosmic being latched to her arm that hates clothes. Now we see what happens when they meet up again and the title billing gets flipped, as I'm taking issue with Witchblade Tomb Raider. Let's see if this follow-up makes us want to turn the page, or turn our heads. The cover is pretty simple. Our star heroines in matching catsuits, the Witchblade armor aside, relaxing against a golden idol of some kind, covered in cracks and hieroglyphs. Attractive people don't have to follow the museum's no-touching rule. An alternate cover has the cop in her barely covered standard, because again, 1990s, while an enlarged image of Lara appears behind her. It works fine as a cover, but seems much more basic, making the first cover at least more interesting despite the white background. Written by Michael Turner and Bill O'Neill, with art by Michael Turner, Joe Weems, Jason Gorder, and Jonathan D. Smith, we begin with a poorly conceived text introduction. The problem is that the very thin font is against a dark brown, spotty background, and makes it really hard to read. Admittedly, part of that here is me making the pages smaller, but I think they should have gone bolder so the paragraphs would stand out more. Kinda like Sarah's name at the end, as it sits between the final two lines. Anyway, the intro is Pizzini talking about arresting a knife-wielding killer, seeing him get convicted thanks to her graphic testimony, then getting an email from Lara Croft. The archaeologist wants Sarah's help with something supernatural that may be connected to the Witchblade, and says to meet at the British Museum in London. Sarah reflects on her first meeting with Croft, see my Tomb Raider Witchblade Revisited review, and decides to take some vacation days to see her friend. That's where the comic proper begins, with Sarah arriving in a slinky dress and told that Miss Croft awaits her inside. "Thank God Lara told me to wear my pretties." Her dress is made of 100% pure flying monkey, imported directly from the land of Oz. Eager to take in the sights and learn what connection may have been found to the Witchblade, she heads inside, when a woman with two armed goons leave with an artifact, having intended to keep their weapons on Croft, but they lost track of her. They hop into a getaway car, as Sarah figures she shouldn't interfere, not really knowing what's going on. But who should appear with weapons drawn but the intrepid Tomb Raider on a splash page? Little known fact, Great Britain deputizes archaeologists as officers of law enforcement. Apparently. Gotta say, this is a very indistinct background. Really hard to tell where she is. Did she travel through a dimension of fog and ghosts or something? Is that how the thieves lost sight of her? Anyway, Pizzini is elected to drive so Lara can shoot. Both her gun and exposition about how the Idol of Bastet was about to make its public debut when it was taken by perfumer and widow of an earl, Genevieve Le Cavalier, who's obsessed with cats. She even stole every single copy of 2004's Catwoman on Blu-ray and DVD. But no one considers that a crime. Lara expected the theft, and Sarah figures that's why she was called across the proverbial pond. And yeah, the scan of this two-page spread has cut out a portion of the top. I went to several sites just to get the same image, so here we are. From the context, I'd say that Lara is telling her to be more careful on the road, which I'm sure is easy for an American that doesn't drive much back home and has never driven in a country where the directions are flipped, but back on point. Shortly after Lara retrieved the statue, Genevieve invited her to her home and offered to buy it from her, and was pushy enough that it made the Tomb Raider suspicious, and went all Indiana Jones on the matter.
That belongs in a museum!
Save your money for the veterinarian, Miss Cavalier. I'm serious. You say you love your cats, but several of your pets look rather sick. That one's got something green oozing out of its eyes. The woman's determination to have the idol at all cost made Lara think there was more to the Egyptian artifact, so no wonder she'd steal the thing and claim Croft forced her hand. As they close in on another two-pager, the cop wants to know what this has to do with her symbiont. Several weeks ago, Lara was contacted by an associate, Buck Ogden, with a plan to retrieve the idol that apparently she'd never heard of before. Bastet being the goddess of cats, her pyramid's entrance would only be accessible to the lithe and limber, so they had to parachute in near the top and rappel down.
It was inside on some wall hieroglyphs that Laura saw reference to the Witchblade, now the oldest Sarah knows of, with a possible shared history with the idol of Bastet. But they could never settle on how to divide up chores. The Witchblade kept ripping up the statue's shirts for some reason. The statue kept dropping dead birds in front of the Witchblade. You know, standard roommate arguments. Upon reaching the shrine for the bauble, bathed in a possibly mystical light, Laura lifts it from its pedestal, causing the eyes to glow and the nearby statues to come alive. The two ran for a nearby exit, but just as the doors closed, only Croft narrowly managed to escape. She tried to get back inside for Buck, to no avail, leaving her with serious survivor's guilt. His death, his final expedition and last hurrah for history, was the primary reason she couldn't sell it to the old woman.
I should have gone on that expedition with Jackie Chan. The worst that happens is his 12-year-old niece tags along and we fight some bungling henchmen.
Just like Jackie. He reminds me of a chimpanzee. Uncle.
The goons have stopped on a bridge and opened fire. Sarah swerves, not knowing the windshield is bulletproof, and the women veer over the side. And a weird coloring mistake makes it look like the bridge has either disappeared or is transparent. In any case, she snags a support beam with her symbiont, and they have time for vehicular mourning and snappy banter before getting back on their mission. As night falls, they tread across an icy moor to reach an old castle, long rumored to be associated with witchcraft, where Genevieve is conducting a ritual of her own.
Powers dark and powers light, I command thy aid upon this night. Confer to me Bastet's essence, so shall I be for all times hence.
And a burst of energy knocks her from the platform. Turns out magic isn't just saying what you want in dramatic rhyme. Were that the case, I'd use it all the time. Wait a minute. And that ain't just me being snarky, people. On 2-page spread number 4, Bastet has appeared with her off-brand battle cat, Manaress, or Manaray, I'm not sure, noting the abominable conjuration. If you think that's bad, lady, try reading what Tynian does with computer hacking and Shakespeare. Genevieve is pretty indignant, having expected to be empowered by the Egyptian deity instead, but figures she can work this in her favor somehow.
Let's see. My first wish is for you to keep me out of jail.
With an after-school program that teaches you responsibility, or a Monopoly game card. Or, you know, feed the later to her oversized tabby.
Ah, good boy, little drooly.
While the old woman's goons make a run for it, our heroines need to find a way to return Bastet to the idol.
And since we can't prosecute a cat for homicide, or a goddess...
Now, if it had been an enormous parakeet and a greater mountain goblin, that'd be another story. A fire blast gets their foe's attention, telling her she doesn't belong in their world, and the offended Bastet considers the two as little more than additional fancy feast.
Manaress, I'm sure you're still hungry.
Yeah, but give me a minute. Entitled rich people don't always agree with me, and... oh, she may be making a comeback, boss.
Pizzini ensnares the beast, and the goddess recognizes the Witchblade, intending to settle their mysterious score. Though noticing Lara going for the idol, fires an energy blast at her first, but it's fortunately evaded while she grabs the statue. Bastet keeps firing, rambling about what the Witchblade did to her, taking her love, sanity, freedom, destroying her magic. And yet she's displaying magic, but whatever. Sarah thinks she means her specifically, until Lara, joining her friend behind the giant restrained cat, clarifies it's the symbiote.
Now give me your hand. I need its power. Oh, come on, I thought you charged your phone on the drive over. Whatever did I do to engender such hatred?
My guess? Probably something you posted on Twitter 3 years ago that resurfaced. Sarah grabs the idol, which draws Bastet into it via the Witchblade, somehow, I guess. Drained from the experience, she mentions feeling a savage joy, hatred from the Witchblade in recapturing the goddess, and wonders if they did the right thing. But Croft says it's done, and the statue is too dangerous for a museum. Given a previous adventure and a different magical item getting away from the Globetrotter, Pizzini decides to hold onto the statue, while Laura gets to keep the now tiny Manaress, emerging from his headdress. Sure, he'll be cute for a while, but don't be surprised if he still poops out an entire dead woman in a few hours. At Laura's mansion, they relax by, or in the pool, the kind of vacation Sarah had hoped for. though Lara is fixated on Bastet's intentions. Despite killing Genevieve, who was out looking for trouble, the goddess seemed genuine when she said her love was stolen from her.
Lara, you're not going to get all mushy on me, are you? No. Well, maybe.
Phrasing.
We zoom in on Manneress's eye, into a pyramid, into Egypt, as Croft exposits that while she wouldn't trade her globe-trotting adventure for a normal life, it does get lonely since she's almost always going solo. If any ancient death trap does her in, there isn't likely going to be a search party for her. This makes her identify with Bastet, who lost her love to the Witchblade and held the grudge for 1,000 years. Changing subjects, she decides to name her new cat Buck, after her friend, whom she hopes is resting well. And the comic ends on Mr. Ogden just chilling next to one of the guards of the idol, and a caption implying this will be covered in the Tales of the Witchblade title. That was Witchblade Tomb Raider, and while I can't say I have any special attachment to either of them, this wasn't a bad read at all. It certainly felt a tad rushed, with a lot of flashing back to establish what's going on in the present. It at least makes sense, since so much of the establishing events happened on Lara's end of the crossover. Also, since this isn't their first time meeting, there's an established link between the two, so it would make sense that the current adventure would progress a bit more swiftly, though I'm not sure that introduction from Pizzini's perspective really served a purpose at all. She mentions putting a dangerous criminal away, and some statistic about there being 10 murders a day in Manhattan. At most, it conveys the stress of her job and how badly she needed a vacation, but it doesn't really come up in the story to feel like it mattered. Though, according to DisasterCenter.com, murders in New York City have been on the decline for decades, and in all of 1998, when this was published, they totaled under 1,000. In fact, the highest they ever got was a little over 2,600 in 1990, so I don't know where the writers got that 10-a-day statistic from, except maybe wanting to be a bit more dramatic. A full page of her being stressed at her job, ending on Lara's email invite, would have been a better way to show her eagerness for time off, while peppering in a couple more references throughout the story. Though I'm not sure why it was necessary for Sarah to bring her pretties. It's established that Lara Croft is crazy rich, so maybe she's so detached from society she thinks everyone has expendable evening wear they don't mind getting shredded in a firefight. There are a few eyebrow raisers, though. Like, if the perfume magnate's incantation was so terrible, how did it release an Egyptian goddess and her pet? Did Bastet manage to break free simply by her sheer offense at the so-called magic words? I also thought it was kind of weird that instead of being drawn back into the idol with her, Manneress, or now Buck, was simply turned into a cub. Yeah, magic, I know, but there still need to be some rules so it makes sense. And I don't get why Lara was being so empathetic over Bastet. Okay, it's a fine moment for the Tomb Raider to show some vulnerability, but there was never anything in the story to back up Bastet's claims. There weren't many hieroglyphs about her connection to the Witchblade, so no context on what it allegedly did that ruined her life. Without that, Croft's sympathies feel pretty random. I mean, maybe the blade did somehow take away Bastet's love and all that stuff, but she also could have been a very real threat at some point. Just because she had a love interest doesn't mean she wasn't a villainous person. The first thing she did when she got freed was murder the one that freed her. I also noticed during the flashbacks how Lara's narration boxes would kind of lead into dialogue in the past. It's not bad or anything, just a little peculiar given the frequency. Maybe it's just teetering on awkward. The two main characters seem to play off each other well, definitely giving this an entertaining buddy cop vibe, but since they didn't really connect much in the first crossover, this can feel like a friendship leap. I thought the art was pretty good, really nicely detailed with the clothes and the buildings, even though sometimes backgrounds were very vague. And much like their first team-up, it didn't lend itself too far or very often into cheesecake territory. Again, surprising given these characters, and Lara in particular. Overall, while the story did feel a little short and rushed with so many two-page spreads, it's not bad. It works as a sequel adventure, but might be more enjoyed by fans of either character. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.